The sound wasn't a crash at first. It was that sharp, sickening crack of metal folding in on itself like a soda can getting crushed slow. Then the glass chimed across my driveway, little glittering pieces skipping into the street. I stood there holding my phone, watching the HOA president grip a metal bat like it was her gavel, her badge, her whole personality. And I remember thinking, this can't be real. This can't be happening on my property. And then the red and blue lights washed over my house, and I realized the worst part wasn't the damage. It was how sure she looked that she'd get away with it. The neighborhood I moved into was supposed to be quiet. Tree-lined sidewalks, tidy lawns, the kind of place where people wave with one hand while they water the other side of their driveway. I'm not the guy who looks for trouble. I'm the guy who pays his bills, keeps his yard decent, and tries not to get dragged into other people's nonsense. But HOAs have this special talent for turning normal life into a permission slip. Ours was called Cedar Grove Estates, and at first it was the usual stuff. Trash cans can't sit out all day. Grass can't look like a science experiment. Okay, fine, whatever. Then Brenda Holloway happened. That was the moment the neighborhood stopped feeling like a neighborhood and started feeling like a stage where one person got to play judge and everyone else got to be background extras. It started with a new rule that didn't feel new so much as manufactured, like it spawned overnight. I woke up and there it was, printed laminated taped to mailboxes like a warning nobody asked for: no open bed trucks, no exceptions, guests included. By sunrise, bright orange violation stickers were already spreading down the block like some weird HOA measles, windshields, tailgates, even a delivery van that didn't belong to any resident. Brenda strutted down the curb with her phone held up, snapping pictures like she was collecting evidence for a trial she'd already won in her head. I didn't even own a truck. I figured, great, not my problem. I stayed invisible. That didn't protect me. By noon, my phone buzzed with a courtesy notice about guest compliance. No incident listed, no date. Just that cold little reminder that violations would escalate. And then that evening, a neighbor asked me if it was true visitors couldn't park overnight anymore. The way she asked, quiet, cautious, like she didn't want to be overheard, made my stomach twist. The next week, I noticed delivery drivers calling instead of pulling into driveways. One guy told me, half apologizing, he'd already been hit with a fine once and he wasn't risking it again. Another canceled outright. Suddenly, my house felt fenced in, and not with wood or metal, just fear and paperwork. 3 days after the mailbox rule, I got my first official letter. Not even addressed to me personally, just my address bolded like a target. It claimed guest vehicle non-compliance, warned of escalating fines, towing authorization, and eventually a lien against the property. No photo, no timestamp, just consequences. It ended with Brenda's name and the HOA letterhead like it was a stamp of moral superiority. And I read it twice because one line made my jaw clench. You have been warned before. I hadn't. That was her trick state. Things like fact, then move on before anyone can challenge it. When I emailed back asking what bylaw gave them the right to control a guest's vehicle on my private driveway, she replied like she was talking to a child who asked why the sky is blue. All vehicles entering this community fall under HOA standards. Compliance is not optional. Not optional. Like she was the law. Like my mortgage was a lease from her. And the worst part? The street stayed quiet. Nobody corrected her. Nobody said, yeah, she's doing this to me too. That silence wasn't an accident, it was her real power. She'd trained the neighborhood to look away. Then came the day my friend Marcus rolled into town. Marcus Reed is the type of guy who doesn't draw attention. No flashy suit, no look at me vibe. He drives a plain pickup with an open bed because, it's a truck. He was coming by to catch up, grab a beer, talk about life, normal human things the HOA apparently considered a threat to property values. The second he pulled into my driveway, I felt my whole body tense like I'd just heard a rattlesnake. I actually said out loud, "You might want to park down the street." And Marcus looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I tried to explain the rule, the notices, the threats. He didn't laugh, but he did this little exhale through his nose like, "Wow, you're living with that." "It's my driveway," I said, and I realized how weak it sounded even to me. Because if it was really my driveway, why did I feel like I needed permission? Brenda didn't even wait. She appeared like she'd been watching from behind her blinds, wearing that tight smile people wear when they think they're about to win. Clipboard under one arm, highlighted bylaws under the other tab, sticking out like bookmarks in a courtroom file. She quoted sections, fast, confident, loud, like speed alone made them law. Trucks are prohibited. Guests are not exempt. Aesthetics matter. Property values come first. Then she looked at me like she was doing me a favor. "You've been warned before," she said again, and I felt my face heat up because there were neighbors standing at the edge of their lawns pretending they weren't listening. I wanted somebody, anybody, to say, "That's not true." Nobody did. Brenda's eyes slid to Marcus, narrowed, measuring. Visitors follow the same rules she said, especially when they think they're special. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't puff up. He just stood there, calm hands visible, like he knew the best way to deal with a bully is to let them show everyone who they are. After she left, I tried to shake it off, but that letter sat in my brain like a pebble in my shoe. And over the next few days, my life got smaller. Contractors wouldn't come into the neighborhood because they'd been threatened with towing. Friends hesitated because they didn't want drama. Packages got dropped at the entrance like I lived behind a moat. I started catching myself checking the street before I stepped outside like I was doing something wrong just by existing. And then, I hit that ugly, quiet moment you don't admit out loud. Late at night, sitting at my kitchen table, staring at another HOA email with that stiff final notice subject line, I thought maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe everyone else has figured out how to live with this and I'm just stubborn. I even pictured myself listing the house, packing up, leaving, because what's the point of fighting an entire system when you're just one person? I remember thinking it'd be easier to give up. That thought scared me more than Brenda did, because once you accept that you can't fight back, you start shrinking everywhere, not just in your driveway. So the next morning, I did the least dramatic thing possible. I went hunting for facts. I called the county clerk's office and asked point blank what authority an HOA has to enforce a vehicle ban on a guest in a private driveway and whether they can threaten liens and towing based on that. The woman on the phone didn't hesitate. "They don't," she said. "And if they're enforcing a bylaw amendment, it needs to be properly recorded. If it wasn't approved and filed, it's not valid." That one sentence felt like someone opened a window in my head. Because suddenly, it wasn't me versus Brenda's confidence, it was reality versus her performance. I pulled every email, every notice, every screenshot, and I sent it to Marcus. He read it quietly. No big reaction. Then he looked up and said, "Let's see how committed she is." 2 days later, middle of the afternoon, broad daylight, Marcus rolled that same pickup into my driveway again, slow, deliberate, like he was placing a chess piece and inviting Brenda to make her move. Curtains shifted, doors cracked open. The whole street noticed. Brenda came marching down the block with purpose, and her clipboard was gone. In her hand was a metal bat carried low like she'd already decided how this would end. Final warning, she announced loud enough for phones to appear. Marcus asked one question, calm and clear. "Under what authority?" Brenda laughed like that was adorable. "I don't need to explain myself to you," she snapped. "This community has rules." Marcus nodded once. "That's what I thought." And then Brenda swung. The bat came down hard. Metal screamed, chrome, shattered glass skittered across concrete. She swung again harder, like each strike was proof she was still in control. Neighbors shouted. Someone yelled, "Stop!" Nobody stepped in. She raised it a third time, and I finally moved my thumb, hit 911 so hard it hurt. Brenda saw my phone and smiled, breathing hard, triumphant. "Good," she said. "Let them come." Sirens cut through the street fast. Cruisers pulled in, doors opened. Officers moved cleanly, splitting the driveway into lanes like they'd done it 1,000 times. One officer locked eyes on the bat and told Brenda to put it down. She didn't. She talked over them, voice sharp, and practiced stabbing the air with the bat like it was a pointer. "This vehicle is prohibited." He ignored written warnings. "I'm enforcing HOA bylaws." The officer asked for IDs. Brenda handed hers over. First, smiling already like she was rehearsing the ending. Then the officer took Marcus's license. He paused, looked again. His posture changed, hand drifted toward his radio. Brenda laughed once like, "Go ahead, do what you need to do." And then the officer read the name out loud, careful, almost like he didn't want to set off an explosion. "Sir, you are the current district attorney for this county." Marcus nodded once. No announcement, no speech, no flex. The street didn't erupt. It went dead silent. Brenda's mouth opened, closed, opened again, and you could actually watch the confidence drain out of her face in real time. "No, this isn't—" He never said, she stammered, stepping back like the driveway had turned into quicksand. The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, you are being detained for criminal mischief and destruction of private property." Brenda whipped her head toward the HOA board members gathering at the edge of the driveway. "You approved this," she barked. "You saw the letters?" They didn't answer. They didn't meet her eyes. The bat slipped from her hand and hit the pavement with this hollow clack that somehow sounded louder than the sirens. The officer guided her wrists behind her back. The cuffs closed with a sound that carried farther than anything else, like the neighborhood finally heard a boundary snap into place. Brenda protested, accused everyone of harassment, intimidation, abuse of power. Right up until the officer started reading her rights and her words tangled in her throat. Marcus stayed silent. He didn't correct anyone, didn't demand special handling, didn't turn it into a show. He just stood there, while the system she'd been pretending to be collided with the real one. Phones followed her as she was led to the cruiser neighbors who'd stayed quiet for years, filming openly now like they were trying to rewrite their own silence. Brenda looked back at me, once eyes wide, not angry anymore, just realizing the shield she thought the HOA gave her had vanished in front of everyone she'd trained to look away. The cruiser door shut, and with it, her grip on our street snapped clean, public, irreversible. Lesson paper rules mean nothing when someone tries to use them as a weapon, because the moment you stop staying quiet, bullies lose their air.